This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. Coming up on the show, Hunter Biden's infamous laptop will be used as evidence in his federal trial on gun charges.
I really respect Sky News for covering this because a lot of mainstream media companies here in America will not cover Hunter Biden fairly.
Comedian Alex Stein will join us from Dallas, Texas to unpack what this means for the president's son. Also on the program, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak calls a surprise general election for the 4th of July much sooner than expected. We'll get the latest on the situation in the Middle East as families of 5 Israeli soldiers being held hostage by Hamas terrorists release a graphic video of their abduction as they call for their release. In the US, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley reveals she will be voting for Donald Trump. Will her supporters follow her lead? Plus, Kensington Palace provides a major update on Princess Catherine 2 months after her cancer diagnosis was made public. Comedian Ricky Gervais has shared a special message to the woke groups of people who are often easily offended and don't know what it's like to have a sense of humour. He posted on X, "Thanks to everyone who complained about this trailer and even signed a petition to get Armageddon removed from Netflix. You helped make it the most watched special in the world." And I'm sure they absolutely loved hearing that. But joining us from Dallas, Texas is comedian Alex Stein. Alex, great to be with you. Look, Ricky Gervais is just brilliant in his ability to be fearless and funny as he trolls these woke groups of people who try to cancel him. But what's it like being a comedian in 2024?
Well, I mean, people try to say it's bad or it's hard because you're always going to get canceled, which that is a possibility. But it's kind of funny how this worked out for Ricky Gervais, is how this bad attention helped it be the #1 trending thing on Netflix, or at least the thing talks about. And it's similar to what happened with Kristi Noem, who's a governor here in America, who was trying to sell a book and talked about how she killed her dog and how she met Kim Jong-un. She lied in this, she basically lied in her own documentary. But that negative publicity ended up being positive, and she ended up on the New York Times bestseller. So there's this weird thing where hate, even though it's negative attention, I guess Roger Stone said it best. It's better for people to be talking bad about you than not talking about you at all. So it just comes with the territory. If you're going to be a comedian or politician, you're probably going to get some sort of kickback.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take a look at Ricky Gervais in that Netflix stand-up.
Well, I am woke now, and I can prove it. Here you go. I love illegal immigrants. Yeah, sue me now. Sometimes I go down to Dover for the day, right? And I look out, right? I look for a boat, and I see a dinghy with about 60 of them, and I go over here, like, right? And I pull them into shore, and I go, "Women and children first." They go, "There are no women and children." "Just you lads, is it? Just come on, lads. Come on, lads."
I love him. Alex, does it spark some important conversations as well?
Oh my God. I think Ricky Gervais, when he hosts the Academy Awards or the Golden Globes, whatever award shows that he hosts are always the most memorable thing because he doesn't pull any punches. And this is the thing, is most people, we try to break everything down and right or left. Most people are in the middle. And I think Ricky Gervais plays that very well, that he's really in the middle. Like illegal immigration, it's an issue, people are taking social services from Americans here in America, and it's happening all over the world in Europe. So he's just kind of calling out what's obvious. And that's the thing, is really in this day and age, if you just point out what's actually happening, it's so absurd that it's comedy in itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't really have to create anything. You can just basically regurgitate what's happening, and it's either you got to laugh or cry about it. And Ricky Gervais makes people laugh.
Comedian Stephen Merchant is among other comedians who have been speaking out against cancel culture. He just recently told The Observer magazine that the left is policing comedy with sensitivities that seem out of proportion to the joke. Do you agree with that sentiment? I'm sure you do, but how important, I suppose, are digital shows and podcasts as a platform for comedy and also free speech?
Well, obviously podcasts and, now people creating their own sketches, that is so important. But this is a very serious thing. When you talk about Stephen Merchant, you talk about Ricky Gervais, they created The Office. The Office was, spun off here in America. And that was the #1 show. And Michael Scott, the lead character, the David Brent character, was played by a guy by the name of Steve Carell, who's one of the best comedic actors in America. But he even said that if they tried to make The Office today, they could not do it because it would be too controversial. And yes, The Office was a little controversial, but it wasn't that controversial. And just imagine, we live in such a political correct nightmare that The Office could theoretically not be made today. So what's sad is that the boundaries have gotten so tight, it's almost impossible not to cross them.
Does that worry you looking ahead?
I mean, a little bit. You know, I work for The Blaze. I work for a media company, and I've gotten in a few tiffs with like Nikki Haley's staffers, and The Blaze wants to protect free speech, but there's the thing, the cancel culture, the mob, it does affect companies, it does affect production companies, it does affect Netflix. So yeah, it does kind of stink that I can set off somebody and I could potentially lose my job. I worry about that all the time. I'm not even saying this just because you're interviewing me about it.
Yeah, I'm
constantly under scrutiny for stuff that I don't even think that is that edgy. Like, for example, with Nikki Haley, with her status, I brought up that she supposedly had an affair with her wife, and affair on her husband while he was overseas. Now, this is kind of talked about. It's basically like an open, secret. And I almost lost my job for calling attention to this. So it is very scary, Gabriella, that, you talk about this stuff, and if there's one person with enough power or clout, you could be taken out like that.
Yeah, Stephen Merchant went on to say that it is so difficult for comedians right now because they might have to go back spending weeks justifying their jokes on social media. But let's look at another issue. Women's basketball superstar Caitlin Clark has signed a major sponsorship deal with Wilson. Now, the company will be releasing a collection of signed items, including limited edition basketballs. But what makes the Indiana Fever star so popular? Well, according to The View co-host Sunny Hostin, it's partly because she's white.
I do think that there is a thing called pretty privilege. There is a thing called white privilege. There is a thing called tall privilege. And we have to acknowledge that. Yeah. And now, Caitlin Clark is bringing this money, these sponsorships, we hope, into the league, and other players will benefit from it. But I do think that she is more relatable to more people because she's white, because she's attractive.
Alex, some insightful commentary on The View there?
Well, it's always a racist that makes everything about color of skin and gender. And it's kind of like DEI. Caitlin Clark was not a DEI choice. The reason why people like her is because she's a leading NCAA women's basketball scorer of all time. She's greatness. People love greatness here in America. We love comeback stories. We love underdogs, but people also love greatness. She's one of the greatest players. And, but Sunny Hostin does have a point. Now, Gabriella, you might not know this, but last year around the same time, I was one of the first people to talk to Brittany Griner when she, we traded her for the Merchant of Death. He was a guy that we traded with Putin, and it got Brittany Griner out of jail. And at the time, it was a very controversial thing because I saw her at the airport at, she was flying on a commercial plane. And what they said was at the time that they're going to give the women chartered flights because of this confrontation, but they never did. And then fast forward a year later, Caitlin Clark joins the league. She brings a huge amount of attention, and now they're getting chartered flights. So in a way, it did seem kind of, for me, I hate to say it, I don't think Kathy Engelbert, the chairman of the WNBA, the commissioner, I don't think that she's necessarily racist, but it does look bad for them that they wouldn't protect their black athletes, and now they're doing everything for Caitlin Clark. But it's not based on race. It's based on popularity because she's the best player. They want to make everything about race. If Caitlin Clark wasn't the best player, nobody would care. But of course, the host on The View has to make everything about race and has to just spread victimhood because that's the narrative that they love to preach and promote the most.
Well said. Let's chat about Hunter Biden. It's been revealed that Hunter Biden's abandoned laptop, which allegedly contains evidence of influence peddling and drug use, will take centre stage during his federal trial on gun charges. And just to recap, Hunter Biden was charged with illegally purchasing and possessing a gun, and he has pleaded not guilty and claims that he's being politically targeted. But Alex, can you just remind us what's allegedly on that hard drive and how this is going to play out for Hunter Biden?
Well, first of all, sadly, I don't think Hunter Biden is ever going to face any sort of the repercussions that are due for. Listen, Hunter Biden was leading Burisma, an energy company in the Ukraine, and now we're supporting a never-ending war in the Ukraine. Hunter Biden is connected with China, where potentially America is going to have to defend Taiwan against China. And if we can't beat the Taliban in a war, if we lost the Vietnam War, I'm really worried about fighting a war with China. So Hunter Biden is a despicable person, but I actually I'm empathetic to him because he lost his mom at a young age. His drug abuse is the only thing that actually makes him likable. You know what I mean? A lot of people here in America, drugs are a huge issue. Everybody knows an uncle, a drunk uncle, or somebody that has substance abuse problems. That humanizes him. But what doesn't humanize him is the fact that his dad was benefiting from his power as vice president and using his son as a literal bag man, getting money from China, getting money from the Ukraine. So for me, if you just look into it, a lot of people are not willing to actually put in the time to look into Hunter Biden, but Hunter Biden is a criminal that has sold out the American people. I don't like him for that sense. The fact that he's had substance abuse issues, that kind of normalizes him. So I have this weird kind of dichotomy, love-hate relationship with Hunter Biden, is that I don't like what he did for our country. I don't like about how he used his dad for power, but I'm also empathetic because he's probably had a lot harder life than you would expect being the vice president's son and now the president's son.
Looking at the last presidential election in 2020, Facebook restricted the story from the New York Post about Hunter Biden's laptop, which allegedly contained emails that Joe Biden was helping his son's business dealings with Ukraine. Now that this laptop, that this hard drive is going to be used as evidence in a federal trial, how is this going to impact this election in November 5 when we're seeing Joe Biden and versus Donald Trump once again? Are we going to see big tech really try and restrict these types of stories again?
Well, 100%. You know, Gabriella, I'm not trying to kiss your derriere when you say this, but I really respect Sky News for covering this because a lot of mainstream media companies here in America will not cover Hunter Biden fairly. And yes, during the 2020 election, there was 50 ex-Department of Justice, CIA, FBI members that said that this was just Russian disinformation. That all proved to be false and that they lied about it because they wanted to protect Joe Biden in the 2020 election. So I have no faith in the technocracy, all the tech companies that control the narrative, that can censor people if they speak out against it. And sadly, I really do think 2024 is going to be very similar to 2020. And, you know, it's not even about the laptop. We know the laptop is real, but they'll tell you that it's not. And that's what's so mad. That's what's so maddening. That's what pisses me off, excuse my French, is that the government can just lie to us. And then when we catch them in that lie, they face no repercussions. We just have to move on and try to forget about it. It's really, we have a two-tier justice system, one for the elites and one for everybody else.
Let's look at what's happening on the campaign trail. President Joe Biden was in New Hampshire this week promoting his administration's veterans policy, sounding as eloquent as ever. Let's take a listen.
Let me close with this. After I signed the PACT Act into law.
Doesn't he sound great, Alex?
I mean, tell me this, Gabriella, what do the people of Australia think of Joe Biden? You know, whether you like Trump or not, at least he can speak. You know, I'm not even saying you guys have to love Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not perfect. But we have a president that is falling up the stairs, that can't you know, put out a coherent thought. There's rumors and speculations that he might be on some sort of performance-enhancing pharmaceutical drugs to try to keep him awake. Like, it's almost a stain on the entire world, not the country, that this is the leader of the free world. So is Joe Biden popular in Australia? They have to think that he is the biggest joke ever. What do the people think in Australia of Joe Biden, if you don't mind me asking?
You know what? People who aren't fans of Donald Trump, I think they get really quiet when it comes to Joe Biden. But I think even if you are a Democrat supporter, you know that Joe Biden is just not the man for the top job, and they really need to see someone else. Because you can't keep looking at clips after this clip again and again. You know, it's just like, how much longer can he really be campaigning for?
And Gabriella, he said if you don't vote for him, you're not black. He said that to the black community. That is, if Donald Trump said that, they would throw him in jail. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know, Joe Biden, at one point he was very sharp. At one point he was a good politician, or at least a smart politician, you know, knew how to do his job. At this point, it's like Weekend at Bernie's. They are just propping him up. He can barely walk. And I hate to say this, to me, it looks like elder abuse, because he doesn't want to be the president. He should be on a golf course. He should be at his beach house in Delaware. They shouldn't be parading him, you know, all across the country, basically just, you know, parading around a walking corpse, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, looking at the latest polls, President Joe Biden's approval rating has dropped to its lowest level in nearly 2 years. A recent Reuters Ipsos poll found that only 36% of Americans approve of his performance as president, which is down from 38% in April. So, look, Alex, where is this heading? We know that he is going to debate Donald Trump twice in the next couple of months, but where do you see this going?
Well, I'm kind of at the forefront of the politics in America. I mean, there are people that know more about politics than me, but I can just I talk to people. I go to a lot of protests. I speak to a lot of political influencers. I speak to a lot of politicians. What I think is, I think Donald Trump is a more popular candidate, but people are having political fatigue here in America. So I think there's going to be a record number of people that don't participate in this next election. Does that benefit Trump? Does that benefit Joe Biden? I don't know, but I'll just tell you this much. More so than 2016, 2020, people are like, I don't like either candidate. And I would never have thought that I would see that. So people are sick and tired of it. People can't afford a home. In America, there is no middle class. Literally, I'm just saying, people are struggling to make ends meet. And that's the majority of people here in America. And it shouldn't be like that. We're the land of milk and honey, supposedly. But I don't see any of that milk. I don't see any of that honey. And so, once again, I think that they can fortify an election. I hate to say this. I can't believe I'm saying this on Sky News. I think it's possible that Joe Biden wins again, and he's not even going to be the most popular president, in my opinion. He does not have the popularity level that Donald Trump has.
All the way from Dallas, Texas, comedian Alex Stein, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Great to speak with you.
Thank you. And Gabriella, it's such an honor to be, on your show. Let me tell you something, and this is not a critique whatsoever. The best Sky News host, and this is no diss on you, Rita is the queen. I just want everybody to know I love Rita so much. She's helped me out so much, and I hope that you and I can become friends just like I have been with Rita. I love Rita. I love everybody at Sky News. Thank you so much for having me, Gabriella.
I think I love Rita Panahi even more. She absolutely is the queen of digital here at Sky News. Alex, great to speak with you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called a general election for the 4th of July, several months earlier than expected. He announced King Charles had agreed to dissolve Parliament, even though an election isn't due until late January.
On the 5th of July, either Keir Starmer or I will be Prime Minister. And he has shown time and time again that he will take the easy way out and do anything to get power. If he was happy to abandon all the promises that he made to become Labour leader once he got the job, how can you know that he wouldn't do exactly the same thing if he were to become Prime Minister?
Labour leader Keir Starmer says the election is about change and ending chaos.
Over the course of the last 4 years, we've changed the Labour Party, returned it once more to the service of working people. All we ask now, humbly, is to do exactly the same for our country and return Britain to the service of working people.
Joining us now is finance entrepreneur Dr. Roger Gewolb. Roger, thank you for joining us. Is this a risky strategy with Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party far behind Labor in the polls?
Well, everybody is wondering why in the world would he stand out in the rain, can't even afford an umbrella, and get absolutely soaked while he goes on television and calls a general election today for July the 4th, which happens to be American Independence Day. The main theory going around is that it's because the government is completely out of money. He's not going to be able to make any tax cuts. So he'd be better off, going ahead with that now rather than making people even more disappointed than they are by waiting later and then announcing no tax cuts. My own theory is something rather different. I think that he and his advisors have done something strategic. They have ambushed Nigel Farage because Farage could either stay as a major UK broadcasting star and end up as a friend of Trump in American politics one way or the other, or he could leave all that and come and head the Reform Party, where he would do tremendous damage to the Tories and Labour. And Farage is not going to make that decision until closer to the U.S. presidential elections in November. So in a rather smart move, Sunak and company have forced his hand by calling the election much sooner So he's got to make up his mind, which I'm sure he really doesn't want to do right now.
A YouGov poll found that 61% of people in the UK believe that Rishi Sunak was right to call the general election, and just 11% say that he was wrong. Is that the sense that you're getting in the UK? Do Brits tend to love a bold move?
No, I just think it's that people are absolutely so sick of both politicians, both parties. They're both empty. They gaslight. They don't deliver on their promises. Starmer doesn't even make promises. He just talks about, bold things like truth, beauty, justice, stability. He never says how he's going to do it. And a lot of people actually think that there's going to be a hung parliament where nobody can do anything. Well, I have to say, I've been saying there may be a hung parliament, but it's not going to be a well-hung parliament, because none of these people have got you-know-whats. I mean, it's a terrible situation.
Well, we'll wait and see what happens July the 4th. Let's move on to another quite serious topic now. The families of 5 female Israeli soldiers held by Hamas terrorists have released a graphic video showing their abduction. They call it a damning testament to the nation's failure to bring home the hostages. Now, the Hostages and Missing Families Forum released this footage, and the 5 women were captured near the Israel-Gaza border during the attack on October 7. Roger, what impact will this have?
Well, as I understand it, the worst parts of that video, which are really horrific, have been removed. People just couldn't stand it if they saw it. And it is really shocking, and hopefully it will bring the hostages to the attention of all the people who are demanding a ceasefire and the rest. Because, I mean, how do you have a ceasefire with somebody who's destined to destroy you, and said that if you stop fighting, they'll do October 7th all over again? We
have seen quite horrific pro-Palestine, anti-Israel protests playing out right around the world, right here in Australia as well. And the update on that is that the anti-Israel protesters occupying a major building at the University of Melbourne have finally ended their encampment after a week-long sit-in, while demonstrators at the University of Sydney refused to leave. And these sit-ins are partly inspired by the chaotic scenes that we have seen in America. And of course, if you need reminding of why some protesters felt the need to attend, well, let's just take a look.
I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Yeah.
We'll be free.
I
wish I was more educated. I'm not either.
Oh.
I came from Columbia. I was there up at Columbia, and we came down. They said NYU students needed our support. So I came down. I heard there's lots of cops. Some people were saying it was getting dangerous.
Roger, what's your assessment of the protests that have been unfolding at Australian universities?
I think it's terrible. I mean, these kids look like they're channeling Woodstock and the Vietnam War protests. And of course, there are two different things. I mean, people during the Vietnam War protests weren't embracing the Viet Cong and making them their heroes. They're just totally different. So these poor kids are deluded. But I mean, I think that the media in Australia, the mainstream media, is really not being fair. The reporting of the incidents in Melbourne, where, they didn't even say that the 6 people arrested were all from the pro-Palestinian side, not the other side that was protesting there. And I think it's just crazy. And these kids are going to be very disappointed one day when they realize that they're turkeys for Christmas, because after Israel comes all the rest of us. We're infidels, according to these Islamic terrorists. Everybody who is not their kind of Muslim should be exterminated or whatever. And I'm very disappointed by Albo. I mean, he won't condemn the ICC arrest warrant for Bibi Netanyahu, the press is reporting, because he doesn't want to lose the vote. Well, I mean, that seems to me really horribly cynical, because there's what now, 800,000 Muslims in Australia? I can't believe that all of them feel this way, just like the IRA was in the UK and Ireland. This is a very small number of people My Muslim friends in London are afraid to go out in the street because, white British folk, they say, glare at them. So, I don't think Albo really needed to do that. He could have condemned that idiocy along with everybody else, like even poor old Joe Biden.
I completely agree with you. I think he is wrong not to condemn the ICC. Look, getting back to the protesters and who's really turning up to these demonstrations, as we just saw in that clip, some people don't really know why they're getting swept up in it. And then we are seeing reports that others are getting paid to be there. What impact are the political agitators having on these demonstrations?
Well, I think you've got three classes of people. You've got the political agitators who are certainly, according to sources like the French Interior Ministry, Russian agent provocateur, who are coming over there and paying people and organizing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel marches so that the what we now call the Axis, the powers of Russia, China, Iran, Yemen, and North Korea, can destroy Western values and Western supremacy. So those are really hardcore agitators. Then you've got the people who are being paid, who are the usual suspects who show up at these things and make a lot of trouble. And then you've got the masses of very innocent, well-meaning, pretty naive kids and grown-ups who are fighting for Palestine as they see it. And it's a huge part of it. I think, Gabrielle, is a function of social media and television, which we didn't have, for example, when Britain was bombing Dresden, when they just, blew the hell out of every building in Dresden, killed everybody, didn't care, wanted revenge. Or even worse, can you imagine social media? Can you imagine X and Insta and television reporting on Hiroshima? Where they flattened the place and millions of people. I mean, so these people are seeing this stuff for the first time and it's driving them crazy and out onto the streets. But they don't realize how they're being used as pawns, I feel.
And what's it doing in terms of fueling anti-Semitism? I was speaking to a Jewish student just last night about his experience, the names that he's been called, how unsafe he feels as a university student. What's your assessment of it?
Well, anti-Semitism has been around for a long time. If you Google the words anti-Semitism timeline in Google, you'll see that it goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's always the same thing. And a lot of this anti-Semitism has always been there. And it's just an opportunity for it to come out of the woodwork. It's a good excuse because people can now claim that they're anti-Zionist, but not anti-Jewish. But it's a very fine line. And if you look at the protests, I wasn't in Melbourne, but certainly in London, you see swastikas, you see people yelling, kill the Jews, all sorts of stuff, while the police, just as in Melbourne last weekend, just kind of stand by and don't do very much.
And what should universities be doing? Well,
I mean, they should be cracking down. I think one thing about the universities is that there are two schools of thought here in the UK and in the US, which are there should be no protests, close them down like France and Germany did at the start. On the other hand, free speech exists, let them protest, but let them go somewhere like Regent's Park in London, where they can make all the noise they want, but they don't keep ordinary people from going to work and earning a living. I mean, there's reports every day in the news here about people who are, they're gig industry workers or day workers who've lost a day's pay because they were blocked by Stop Oil or some other protest. So the good thing about the university is they're confined to the campus, and that makes it somewhat better.
Looking at what's unfolded in the past 6 months or so, where would you say we're at? Is there a deeper divide than there was, say, on October 6th?
There's certainly a deep divide. Yeah, it's probably deeper in that I think that a lot of people, at least in the UK, are getting sick and tired of this, having their lives disrupted every Saturday for 7 months, listening to all this nasty polemic demands from all sorts of high-ranking, good and great people for a ceasefire without an explanation of how do you have a ceasefire, with somebody who's going to kill you the next day. And I think they're getting very, very tired of it, and the pressure is on both parties, whoever is the next prime minister, to do something about that and maybe stop them or move them to a particular area where they can, drive themselves crazy and have a ball.
Look, finally, I want to speak to you about woke politics. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese plans to remove a government position from his cabinet. A source close to the Albanese government revealed to the Daily Mail that the role of Assistant Minister for the Republic would be dropped. Now, this move aims to distance him from woke propositions that might affect his re-election bid. What are your thoughts on this? Are we getting sick of woke politics now we're in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, you could almost kind of conflate the protests with the woke politics to a certain degree. And I think we're all getting sick of that too, because, the woke politics, wokeism, is essentially joyous, negative, judgmental, privileged, entitled, and most of all, victimhood on steroids. And I think people are getting tired of listening to this whinging and moaning. And at first they were made to feel guilty, but one can see that large corporations around the world are dumping all of their DEI and their ESG, environment and, governance, all these things that have nothing to do with their business, but which they feel made them more acceptable to the criticisms of the woke people who they thought might be their customers. And they're kind of realizing this is just a waste of time. So I do think that as these big companies disband these departments and these programs and stop funding them, there won't be money for coaches. There won't be money for symposia. And there'll hopefully be less money for the agitators to pay people to go out and protest.
Absolutely. Dr. Roger G. Wobb, so brilliant to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.
Ireland, Spain and Norway have announced they'll recognise a Palestinian state next week, in a move that will further strain relations between Europe and Israel. Now, Israel has, of course, denounced this decision, insisting that this is a reward for terrorism. Joining us is political analyst Professor Joseph Siracusa. Joe, thank you for joining us. Will the Australian government likely follow suit?
Hello, Gabriella. No, I don't think so. I mean, the Australian government will try to show a little independence from the United States, perhaps, but it's not going to be talking about full-scale diplomatic relations. I mean, Palestine has an observer status at the United Nations, and Australian diplomacy tends to be very cautious. It likes to get involved in everything, but not too far ahead of anything.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong has finally responded to the ICC seeking warrants for Israel's Prime Minister over alleged war crimes. Penny Wong says whether or not warrants are issued will be a matter for the court. Is it a weak response?
Well, very cautious indeed. I mean, not a very useful response. I mean, the Americans aren't buying it, nor some of America's great friends. Look, I think the ICC charging Netanyahu and his defense minister with crimes like this is a very serious business, very dramatic. Wouldn't have hurt the Australian government to say this is a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, the ICC charges individuals. The International Court of Justice charges countries. Now, they've been accused of, they're going to be charged, or even if they're not going to be charged, that's what they're asking. The prosecutor's asking for right now. What the prosecutor is saying is that Israel deprived people of food and water, electricity, and ordered the killing of civilians and this kind of thing. Very serious crimes. Whether or not the arrest warrants go through, Netanyahu will spend the rest of his life as an outlaw, as well as his defense minister. So, I think it would behoove Penny Wong, who's a very smart observer of the foreign world. I mean, it wouldn't hurt her to add a little more to her thing than Albanese did. The prime minister said he didn't want to talk about things under litigation. Well, that's a bit of a squib, isn't it? I mean, you got to say something.
Yeah, well, we heard the President of the United States responding. Why couldn't our Prime Minister?
Well, I think the Prime Minister of Australia has just a little less at stake here than President Biden. I mean, Biden, after all, is in lockstep with Israel. He's provided Israel with everything it needs, and that, as Senator Lindsey Graham said yesterday in the Senate, it's just a matter of time before the ICC comes after the United States. Now, a couple of years ago, when Trump was in power, the ICC went after some Americans for killing people in Afghanistan or something like that. And the President Trump ordered sanctions against the ICC. Biden, when he got in, he reversed these sanctions. And here we go back to the sanctions again. So, you know, the problem is not the message, it's the messenger. So the United States is going to push back on this. And keep in mind, China doesn't belong to the International Criminal Court, nor does Russia. A whole lot of people don't belong to it because, Gabriella, this is the day they fear, is when somebody comes to your door and issues an arrest warrant, and you have to go to Holland or to the Netherlands to be tried like a common criminal. It's not a good look, whether you're right or wrong or who's on your side or not. You know, you try to avoid that day. So, you know, the great powers and even the middle powers don't want to get tied up in this. On the other hand, 124 nations in the world are committed to arresting Netanyahu if the arrest warrant is issued, wherever he is. It's the same way that, I think in 2023, Vladimir Putin has an arrest warrant against him. So, you know, these guys are going to be outlaws for the rest of their lives. It's a pity it's come to this, but, you know, if you're going to pay homage to international law, once in a while, international law hits you in the face. And so you got to respond somehow. And the Americans responded by sort of screaming and jumping up and down. The Australian response is much more muted. I have a hunch there's a great deal of debate, Gabriella, within the Australian cabinet about how to respond to this. I'm sure there's some people who think it's a very bad idea, such a muted response, and some people who want to say even less. So I'm sure there's stuff going on in the background.
Of course, of course. Let's talk about Iran. This week, Iran's president and foreign minister died in a helicopter crash. Now, the incident occurred near Iran's northern border with Azerbaijan. Joe, this creates a political vacuum, and how will it really amplify tensions in the Middle East?
Well, look, if I were a war planner in the Pentagon or a war planner in Israel, I'd say, well, this is the opportunity we've been looking for. There is a power vacuum in Iran. The president, of course, is the heir apparent to the Ayatollah's job. And the foreign minister is, of course, responsible for Hamas, the Houthis, the militias in Iraq and Syria, and, of course, Hezbollah. I mean, this particular foreign minister who died was bankrolling all the bad guys in the Middle East. So there'll be this vacuum. And, of course, half of the Iranian population can't stand the Ayatollah anyway. I mean, there'd be no grieving or no lamenting of the loss of these people. Now, when this happened, I was listening very carefully to the Iranian response, and they kept saying, well, don't worry, the country will go on as usual. And Iran's not like the New York Yankees, Gabriella, where if you get hurt, next man up. It doesn't work that way. These guys take years and years to get in these power positions. And so there'd be a struggle for power about who runs the place and about their foreign policy. So it's an important moment for Iran. And, of course, the United States and Israel would like to take advantage of this. And why wouldn't they? I mean, these guys, Iran's running the show in the Middle East. So I'm sure there are people in Washington, particularly John Bolton, jumping up and down saying this is the time to strike Iran while they're weak. There'll be people in Israel who reckon that the only way to make everything go away, to make all the bad press go away, is to attack Iran at the source of the struggle. Of course, Iran's the head of the snake, you know, and so there's a great deal of incentive for Netanyahu to pick a fight with Iran right now, because that would take a lot of the heat off of him and unite the Israeli people. So, you know, it's a very tense moment. And I think the idea of these arrest warrants and the Iranian leadership dying on the same day. I think they're connected. I mean, there's something incredibly karmic about this.
I want to move on to the US election. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley has revealed that she will be voting for Donald Trump in her first public comments since ending her Republican White House campaign. Joe, do you expect that her supporters will follow her?
No, I don't. Her supporters were true believers, Gabriella. They were going to work for her. They gave her money in the hopes that she would keep Donald Trump away from the office. Her saying that she would vote for Trump is really shorthand for, I'd like to run for president again one day, so don't hold it against me. So, she's just sort of preparing the way. Look, this idea of getting endorsements, in the 1920s and 30s, when labor unions and mayors and corrupt city bosses used to deliver large votes to candidates, it was a big deal. But today, to get the endorsement of somebody, it's not such a big deal because you don't know who's who's actually going to follow suit. Americans like to vote independently. It's the same thing in Australia. You can't tell Australians what to do. You can't buy these American delegates. I mean, they have to make their own decisions. So I think it's a little bit of theater on her part. On the other hand, Donald Trump has got to take all the good news he can get because most of the news around him is bad.
So Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be going head-to-head in a televised debate next month. What about RFK Jr.? How's his campaign going?
Well, it's going pretty well from what I can tell. He's still trying to get on the ballot in all 50 states. Now, the reason, Gabriella, that candidates spend millions and millions of dollars is for name recognition, okay? When Robert Kennedy Jr. Is running for president and you see his name on the ballot, you don't have to ask yourself anything. He's Robert Kennedy's son. Everyone knows what he stands for. That is, he stands for an independent run for the White House, and I think he's going to get a lot of votes. And a lot of mainstream in America say that he's going to take votes away from Trump as well as from Biden. I don't believe a word of that. Nobody who's going to vote for Robert Kennedy Jr. was going to vote for Trump anyway. So I think he's going to take the votes from Biden. Now, with the troubles that President Biden is having with his progressive left, with these arrest warrants and things like that, his support has collapsed everywhere. And so Robert Kennedy Jr.'s run for the White House, I think, is the final nail in the president's political coffin.
Former US President Donald Trump and Melania attended their son Barron's graduation in West Palm Beach, Florida. The 18-year-old ceremony was a proud moment for the parents as they cheered from the stands, but also Donald Trump has revealed that, well, he says it's very cute that his youngest child, Barron Trump, has joined his older siblings and officially entered politics. At just 18 years old, Barron Trump is set to make his political debut as a Florida delegate to the Republican National Convention in July. Joe, what do you make of this, of Barron entering politics?
Well, being a delegate, of course, is sort of like a freebie ticket to go to the convention in Milwaukee, and they tend to be captain's choices. All these delegates, they're not exactly an election for them. They're the appointee of mayors and senators and recommendations of congressmen and the like. Now, he will be there. The fact that he will be there, I think, is very interesting because Trump has done a great deal in the last couple of years to insulate his son from politics, from the rough and tumble of politics, and to allow him to be sent to the convention to cast a vote, I think, is very interesting. I don't think Barron Trump's son has a big future in politics. He reminds me a little bit of Henry Ford's grandson, Edsel, which was the biggest, lemon the Ford motor industry ever built, was the Edsel. It looks good. Few people might have bought it in the beginning, but at the end of it, doesn't have a lot of cachet. I think Donald Trump is not the beginning of a dynasty. I think Donald Trump is sort of an aberration. He was a very interesting character who came along at a very interesting time. And keep in mind, your viewers should keep in mind, if Donald Trump wins the election, he's already a lame duck. That is, he's only entitled to one more term of office. He is constricted or constrained by the American Constitution. he could serve it in jail, of course, but he can't run more than once. So in a sense, when he enters office, people who deal with him and just might try to buy time to get rid of him again. So the American presidential process has turned out to be a year-round sort of festival, and I think the president's kids in this is very. But I would have looked for his daughters. And they have seemed to have a little more political clout than Barron does. But Barron doesn't strike me as a natural in American politics. I think it's interesting. It's good to see that his kid wants to get involved in his father's career, but I'm not holding out much of a future for him.
Let's listen now to what Donald Trump had to say.
To me, that's very cute because he's a very young guy and he's graduating from high school this year. He's a very good student, very smart. And I think that's great. I think it's very interesting, too. But he's pretty young, I will say. He's 17. But if they can do that, I'm all for it. I think I'm all for it. And he probably would be, knowing him, he would probably be for it, too.
Joe, before I let you go, what do you make of that? It's probably too early to say whether or not Barron Trump, rather, will be the next, well, not obviously the next, but will be the president one day.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've had a nice long life with some really interesting children. And that conversation suggests to me that Melania had the last say here. I think, listening to that, you get the impression that Trump would like him to stay away. But I think Melania said the kid's going to the conference whether you like it or not. So Trump sort of danced around the decision. But I think Melania was all in on that one.
Okay, Professor Joe Siracusa, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Okay, thank you.
There are fresh hopes for Princess Catherine's possible return to public duties after a Kensington Palace staffer confirmed the Princess of Wales is being regularly briefed on her royal causes. Riley Sullivan is a reporter here at skynews.com.au and he's always across the latest headlines from the royal family. Riley, great to speak with you again. Bring us up to speed. So a staffer at Kensington Palace has shared an update on Princess Catherine's royal duties amid her cancer treatment. What's Kensington Palace had to say about Kate actually returning to work?
That's right, Gab. We've definitely got to treat this with some caution. The Kensington Palace official, he prefaced what he had to say by saying, look, obviously Kate's return to duties is completely contingent on her doctors and her well-being, and they're not going to rush anything. However, he did say that, that, as you said, Kate is still being updated on her causes. In particular, as Princess of Wales, Kate has really championed early childhood development. And a big report came out in the UK this week, which was commissioned partially by the Princess of Wales last year to look into how business leaders and other leaders in the UK can promote early childhood development and the possible benefits of that for the British economy. So a really big report and a cause that Kate really champions and cares about a lot. And we know that she's continuing to be updated on this and probably something that she'll be looking to get straight back into when she does resume her duties.
That's right. And I understand that she's been quite a big driving force behind early childhood. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is going to be her signature cause. If you look back through different royals throughout history, even Princess Diana, royals, and especially the role of Princess of Wales, they will have one big cause. I mean, for Diana, she had lots, obviously. She had, landmines, AIDS, people that are suffering from leprosy, all different types of illnesses. But Kate has really flagged that her passion is early childhood development and using her role as princess to see what she can do to create change.
Well, it is a great update. Any update, I think, on Princess Catherine is well received. Of course, she is the most popular royal, according to the latest polls. But let's talk about the Sussexes, because this week a Sussex insider claims that Meghan Markle is feeling upset by the response to her new product line, American Riviera Orchard. Why is the Duchess of Sussex not happy with how her brand has been received, Riley?
Right, so we heard this week that reportedly Meghan is privately still quite upset with how the initial rollout for American Riviera Orchard was received. She launched a line of jams. We spoke about it on this show about a month ago. And the criticism on social media, often with the Sussexes, is quite negative. And apparently she's still taking it to heart. Allegedly, she feels that whatever she does, she can't win. If she tries to go out on her own and do these business ventures, she's criticised. If she does nothing, she's criticised. So I can kind of understand in a way why she would feel that she can't win. But at the same time, you know, I think that there's a cognitive dissonance there as well, in terms of obviously the relationship between things that she's said and done and Harry's said and done and how the public perceive them.
I think it's going to take some time to win over public support. I think Meghan Markle has a big challenge ahead of her.
She does.
But look, she's trying. There have also been some allegations that Harry and Meghan accepted free flights from an airline operated by a wanted international fugitive during their recent trip to Nigeria. What's the Sussex camp had to say about the accusations?
Right, well, this is quite a serious accusation. So basically, when Harry and Meghan were in Nigeria earlier this month, they flew from London to Lagos on British Airways, very standard, but obviously it was a 3-day tour and they travelled across the country. So when they were travelling around Nigeria, they used a domestic airline called Air Peace. That airline is actually owned by a businessman called Alan Onyema, and he is a wanted international fugitive. The US Department of Justice is seeking his arrest for a range of money laundering charges that date back to 2019. One of his business partners was arrested and I think pled for he pled guilty, but he didn't actually serve any prison time. But this other businessman, Mr. Onyema, has not made himself available to the US Department. So he is a wanted fugitive. And Meghan and Harry's spokesperson came out immediately. They said, look, this was arranged directly by the Nigerian government and the Nigerian military. So they didn't really have any say in the airline that was chosen. But I mean, this man was there at one of the engagements that they did in Nigeria. I also think this shows that the fears that we had about this trip a few weeks ago and the idea that Meghan and Harry could inadvertently damage the reputation of the monarchy was well-founded. You know, when you're not under the British Home Office and you're not there on behalf of King Charles, you can get into all kinds of situations with these business people, even if they had the best of intentions, Gab. Like, you know, it's very unsavoury. So a lesson learned, I reckon, for Meghan and Harry.
Oh, another lesson learned for Harry and Meghan. The list goes on. Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. That is it for Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.